mau omuun ya katangara satellite office ra bulur orior mo ku boksyo kaira chairman o kadama amis there. I'm gonna introduce our senators. Tiang away algora amot joint el meeting lobanggela a chairman ra house el Rebecca ngirmaat el direk long count ngirma Rebecca Sebalt ngirmaat el ngi akuk chairman ra a house era diosisul kamitil kamamangaringi magitire kamle invite tire chamelo ase mem tatakam But understand that tial to koy loro ringan atra FIC misapel mga ringan ako raklawat li yung understanding rin kita rokoy. Mak mo introduce sa senator siya pok mereka akmon sam kuk mo introduce ra atra House of Delegates lulong kelmi. Ma katangal tangat tiang president ra Senate at tanga kalhokon sa Paules. Ya direk ngartiang floor leader kamamal al senator Kray Mariur. Ma senator na kamuran ngiya direk member a committee ongora ara committee ra CHA direk ngarti nga senator Mark Rudim kaya direk chairman ng Mamra Ways and Means ngoram le halider eli mung omomes ramam tangaringal atir ng Mamra May matiktu gigi tek mun sang adeliget rang esar mulkuk pol introducer atra House of Delegates sa lumang kita rin alsils. Aktire kan mo o ay silwasan kaya kita vice chairman ng kamamal Retial Committee at nga kal senator Aldabel aldire kan maatsoy na kita. Delegate tak mamay kung muskaw.
Malungil tutaw ang kuam na introduce nga kang ka at chairman ra health delegate rangat pang nge chairman ra human resource delegate ra Balilio, commerce and trade and delegate ra chairman ra commerce and trade delegate ra Angiwal. Thank you. Sulang.
Malo ay chairman ma atra FIC ma atra FIU ako lingit mong lekong tialol ko yung mentira kalukop pam introducer kami rokoy mar atra FIU no sa pemiwul al direct al metsoy na kamamartial meeting.
Good afternoon. There we go. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us today. We're more than happy to talk about the regulations. As the chairman indicated, my name is Adair Fincher. I am the director of the Financial Intelligence Unit. We are here today to talk about this and also any questions you might have about the Asia Pacific Group and our membership with the Asia Pacific Group, given that there's meetings next week regarding the mutual valuation that's upcoming. As a quick introduction, I just want to run down our board, who you all know, and then our staff and our attorney. So next to me, obviously, I have Chair Okaba Teetong and our Vice Chair, Roy Sali, and finally, member Hermana Edip. Missing is Chance Douglas, who is in Guam. As for the FIU, there's myself, and then there is Boboy Durbay, or Hussein Durbay, our analyst. Behind us, we have Kara Remalik, who's a compliance officer, and also Jeremy Lee, who is another compliance officer. And joining us today is the Assistant Attorney General from the Office of the Attorney General, Christian Mitchell. Thank you so much. And right now, I'll pass over to our chair.
Well, Lugil Litasils, Happy Easter, President. Para malugilar ngo del koltal dobe podokasyo al 2006. Selbe bile la kom kodok ro magi koram daso sige namora ay kril osingi mo. Bebira time agi mo daso se kom namo de kom daso lo se ngare ul tutlam kami. Mama dire kan tino spare kami. Nei gagi del bodo sadre el toya man kol tutlel. Do mesra tletela buladre el time ko mesra di konge ro gulo sendegal akul mo kadum rulay nga protector gidra influencer bebira klol blue mar adro labab toklo do del me so is para long let mang seguida ka mal la gire del ko mo klo miserngi ko da kay ngeso murulay ka mo kom ngusugmam kama mo regel kurba am murulay ka luror ko da kay ngeso lum tantel mo sel ko tulungil letelen bagi adro belaw da sing ang aleda radro belau makadaurur girir egal gimoru la tang mo motrigib ko ana regel ngarul desiu enti kata kay ngesun meru legel la al moru lagi ba multirak le meru lagi gidel program girela regulations la tawara do ma asisabler sel belau ko masaw le domu le la bay mo se to ka saudra selate temedrada du sulang
Musulang chairman awul matial hearing mlot maut ay laikit el tokoil dilung luwas ngarngi proposed regulation el kami wasomil implement ringi ongerung kamamad ko il tiaki mo tangali atletele laurere la IFIC especially at chairman ngak mungata gimilu sa lekong luwas kami mo tial proposed regulation Epato tang mo san man mo tang liling. Giule mesering wayal pol korahang kester ay karokul siopay ngar al sila balur pelaw. Tial regulation na kami olto batang. Mang ediagim understand luwa se anti money laundering Michael section seringi. Michael lo tutel kami oltaw trelang. Nguang rakang kester ngin murkit al other pelaw Michael siopay pelaw. Ngwaya kimkor omes ngil waseng korang arngiya awaya repeated the process artial tokoy rato tu waseng reporting eleng Ministry of Finance arokul ada mo file say ya kuk rebebirar ada bakuk mo file ikel kuk entity tira file ngi wat tokoy rakort yang arngiya officer agil tirkel kuk profit manan profit amlarngi mlamu bele kor kami magi kor omes luase makalel korang arngi poto kawat ngel luase makarata ka seul kut makliktan mongil lengway kim kor omes luase ngarngi process ending waya da san mal kora almutulo makpringaran adale ko report tay kale kor kami msayikit ya mal mokteker tial meeting endigi kulngit luase kami pom explain luase Anti-Money Laundering Act Regulation 3 masele FIU AML CFT Regulation sel direct ngaraw implementing to Regulation 4 ay kaykit ya amla natin amin may kaykit ya so mamal mo matangay masel explain ay kay elpol ngar niya kay mangir ra kamamal tablol plail tong okertialo bang kamirela
Chair akmo sa telala director mang explain ng iltorang apart aso mga nga karamiwal explanation ng or so may akluton mo kung makaringi ako mo ay max mo diesel partling it's technically a legal document so she can better explain it and then ilak ako nga kamas mo dila ko kami Win.
So Regulation 3 is the FIU regulation for other financial institutions, so virtual asset service providers and money value transfer systems. So under the Money Laundering Act, the FIU has the authority to pass additional regulations that highlight additional types of financial institutions or designated financial businesses and professions. So these types of entities are two different entities. So we have the virtual asset service providers. These are cryptocurrency providers, basically, or exchanges. And so they, under the international standards, they're required to be regulated, or at least, regulated for anti-money laundering purposes. They are also used quite often for money laundering. And they're seeing that more criminal organizations are moving their illicit proceeds via or through blockchain. And this is where this regulation comes into place. So the way it's laid out is exactly the requirements of the international standards and will help us meet those international standards as well as give us the authority to regulate them. In addition, we have money or value transfer systems. So these are things like PayPal or communication through PNCC if we were to have something like that. This is already in the law to some extent, but it just makes it very clear that we also cover them and is also an international obligation.
And so may aki lalmal malmorsel 4 or so may ang nga questions karmil kirel tial regulation 3 before the mobile map 4. Tial tagi the regulation 3 di ruli may gagi the virtual asset wa cryptocurrency ma yagid al money value transfer services aiga wa tele la wa yel wa PayPal ma yel transfer of those over electronic platforms ambo agibom regulate al diwabang so mod tirak la osisiu al existing regulation el bangga ol tirak la saya tegid el regulation arulin mo ay say.
Just to clarify, it's not requiring licensure like a bank. So it's just requiring the anti-money laundering requirements, which means having policies and procedures to know your customer, making sure you have somebody that's point of contact for us, certain trainings. So things that we are able to see that there's anti-money laundering provisions in place. So it's not requiring FIC licensure, just to be very clear.
Gada kam dagim bom boring up es local licensing field gim require gal kom balil me haraw license wabang ka hindi require sa tamal tirak lang ko sel borabang get open awa account sa rigid mga ngani gel questions sa ask kabang ka gagidel batang la shoba ya mo tirak le gagidel lo sisiwal lamrula ngira la gal shoba matang se ta okya karingi nga teludo dang ra source ringi gagidel lo tirak la bangkar el time gagidel batang la shoba ya mo tirak la
Kapor sel Regulation 4, him explain ringi.
Regulation 4 is a registry specifically for the FIU. Now, we do understand that this could be difficult given all of the registries that are already existing in the Republic of Palau. But the point of this registry is to only target those reporting entities that are subject to the FIU. And with the hope that in the future we can align our registries so it's not so burdensome. The issue that we're facing is that we are a very small institution with quite a large mandate. As you can see, there's only 4 of us doing the FIU work. And so what we thought would be best, and this is something that happens that is replicated throughout the Pacific, is to create a registry so that we know who our reporting entities are. The registry shouldn't be that difficult. It will be an online registry where the information is provided about the institution, but also they note to us that whether or not they have certain provisions in place to meet the requirements of the Money Laundering Act. This, in turn, will help us understand who has the provisions in place and also help us understand where the high-risk entities are and where the low-risk entities are. So we are only focused on the high-risk entities.
So tell regulation number 4, sira lo mo le kamle mention ak mo already malbato ka a registration processor vela we agi aware mo sa tiang is gonna add on to that. Di tiang gim create ringil obisa mal ki kare gi di tewal adla ruta obisa under tegidel sel Money Laundering Act mal klo authority gi maba maula gi trial agi meruringin mobiot tarkamamel mam dangis ngaral batangin la shoba ya ngar belaw el gira del wadongar etiang as you mentioned the chairman diakal shoba el rogur el celebelaw ngigel entity that are defined under tegidel sel regulation 3 maigel already ngaril existing regulation diakal bora rogur shoba el celebelaw ngia ndulli so agi mam dangis ngarangay kel wal maklol shobay maluba maklol sektor ge del mogorgik ngaram ge kare mangwal lakuk sal loltoy ge gidem ge kare entity magi mo agi seltal gim register agi mo matangis agi concentrate the efforts or obis rangaral sector eguk me abebil leng daka ge kare di ka adrablum daka tutrel ku sal mal loltoy el multirak legal regulations.
Ako lakil trawlaw mura at chairman ra House of Delegates at nakal delegate ng SR. Mulor kati amay kel kuk logora mo samurai sa kel kuk kora lomdasu. El pastrate al delegates kuk pok merege ki pastrate al senators el mo karaker.
Kadalmut mo subesi kadalmut el morsel regulation sen number 3 Aigel electronic transfer of money Murbelaw. Aigel ngaram kok mo regulate. Ang aigel send the merabang al transfer merabang kama Western Union. Hindi ka already exist a regulation rin.
Saya krip na mo sa
Oh,
kulong.
why say?
So,
So they will see. So thank you for your question, first of all. So they will see different processes than the banking system will. So they're kind of front line, right? So when somebody comes to Western Union, for example, and they're going to transfer funds, that the Western Union is the front line institution there, and so they will know their customer. The bank itself, even though it goes through the bank, they might not know that customer. So Western Union also has to provide a review of that. And so that's the reason that we are regulating them.
so agi mamdang a point that you're trying to get at that abang ka already mga marurangi. Di bang ka di madangali a Western Union, di ka lo dangali ngel okya ka Western Union. Mo ka like nga ka bang ka enga Western Union. Nga ka di madangaling kang, di ako dangaling ngel okya ka ringi. So that's why these regulations go into play. Mo understand ngel okya ka ringi.
Okay. Ang adya ka, maybe we're misunderstanding each other. I'm saying doesn't Western Union already have their own? That when you go, they can screen you before they send your money out? So you're just eating up your work and bank's work, and Western Union should have their own. They screen you before you send it out.
That's correct. And so they're actually working to meet the anti-money laundering standards regionally. So Western Union is all around the world. And so it does have a central location where they do keep up KYC. So know your customer requirements. They screen people via Western Unions in different places. But part of our requirements are to also make sure that they comply with Palau law. And then by putting this explicitly in here as money or value transfer system, it meets the international regulations. So it helps us not be gray listed ultimately. But this is the same for all financial institutions that fall under the Money Laundering Act, is that they have to have these provisions in place unless we find that they're low risk and we, sorry, I am blanking, but we decide that we decide that they don't need to comply with the regulations because there's low risk. And we have had financial institutions where we see that they're low risk and maybe don't need to comply to the full extent.
So, yung sel kadi meng ilaang yung diakal Western Union are not subject to what the banks are doing right now. Yes, they're doing it because they're doing it for their home office. Diakal loruringi lo tirakra lulbelaw. The maruringi in compliance with their own home office. Tiang arulik mo sa tamol tirakla lulbelaw.
Kakora miloko ilwase kom karigi karaikel maklol kom bali. Aikel makakari ako tiakal salmal al maya osing yun morngima. Kariga ako tiak kora mo bakikle lel tangari niya makakaril kom bali sabiirel el madu el marula Manila andring el more than maklol kom bali. So makarang ko mo madangel mulbasay ka makakaril kom bali il diakal salmal lultoy raw ta sweater ngil waseng tasabil marula gay gidel el maklol illegal el takoy el merablur belaw malubet yaklol kompali el kuk takargik karngileng sabel el otua sabel marula Manila andring el kuk malmoy mis mang motomalia belaw kora okay el wase ngara klakakaraw sa lagi karay maklo el siyo bayel el bay sabi iwil kargi karaklo and hindi ham kargi karagi karay.
Tila malungil kayo makmam sa teal mang explaining ito kang apart and then akmos mo dito Corbella.
That's a very fair question. So thank you so much for asking it. And we agree. So we haven't actually, I think, placed anybody on the low category, or we do know that there's financial institutions that are low. And the reason we know that is that we met with them and we asked them all about their business practice, how much money, it's a lender, so how much money they lend, what they know about money laundering, who their corresponding banking relationship is, because a lot of the small financial institutions will have a relationship with one of the banks. And so we ask them these questions to gauge what the level of risk is for money laundering. So in a situation where it's lower, they lend less than, let's say, $5,000. They know who everybody is. They can't send it overseas. And it's only the money that's in the bank. That's a very low risk situation. And in that situation, we would probably say you're low risk. What we need to do and what we plan to do is create a rubric or create a method for assessing people low risk. And then they would still need to register with us, and we would re-look at them every year. We just wouldn't necessarily do examinations of them.
So, ito sa kulo ko siyang malungil kersel karim tiya. So, saragim ko talo mo lagay dal tamakadong kum siyang designated non-financial business and professions. Nariwagil tul maklol class ni awan na adrala mawan na credit union. So, we took time, Mitra Palau Bar Association. We got to understand what they do. And the amount of money low spe. Same thing in Moraigal Credit Union. Agim limit, agim lam tingin sa tangara okya kartir, ngara threshold transaction il conduct. And then as a follow-up to that, agi check galbang. Sa tirakat tamral, takbak claim mo, ikagita ngara account 30. Takal si ilal durok legal ludo dal maray kel belaw. So sel gil waisa tumakadongan sing risk-based supervision. Kada mesang sales sector, how much risk they pose to the industry as a whole, and marong decide mo nga is it low risk or high risk, and then even though ndagim sal tori idal kambali, agidi ko required to register. So every now and then, ang kuksa ba asker til may asker dik mo se diro ko sisiwagel o mon rules sa ko agim ko tilmeter kami ngaram latchens. Kung latchens sa threshold kami latchens sabi le most regal industry ang nga mal specific okya karti. Hindi ka dil open ngin more or other okoy. Yak mo ospera example legal credit union. A credit union naman nga it's built for a group of people, community organization, whether the other government at makalawder rawan ministry creating or ta other shell mat makarogo yak msityagit. So agim lo omes ra sel equal lister tier, Miguel shares sila provide, Miguel amount is il provide mar other blue, and then we made the determination kung sa ela kada concentrate ra other la letangar sel high end of the risk, ya credit union na da sal toiring letangar sel bottom ending. So that's how we assess how much level of compliance do we require each sector industry.
Kung microphone sa at ngakal Senator Mario mo okay ra kani.
O akora dire kalway gamil kora concern ng siya marula la artial no require igel remittance tax. Ito dire kan arian other no omis sa igel remittance tax. Maktiral mo do artikel ada bebira balun mo ngem sing ngaringa adal tutiu aseng adra sinal ngara irai el nga udo dun sang en deposit mora adrir Bangladesh mar adrir Uriping Michael bebira balun pakwa di wasegen telay ko trur kami walu beng ngara telela do regegi daigel Diakal muda emang tukuk diakal kora obangkel organization kuk titir mula kembali titir statal mula gaya gitu business senda udah dia remita udah dia adal marata belum dia aku tinggal waseng uang arah officer titir ending nage karera tial tax ra remitan sawul matla mori dia aku tinggal waseng uang bukan langan maka ditulis itu asing ta aerial adirikal gitu lah misalnya lu berkata
Sa adal umalungil issue ding as ko mga mo sa that lagi the particular issue sa agi the question sa mo off the record agim so the before the continue a hearing.
Agi granter kami why say also kung mga ringi ikay kitul ko sensitive issue kung tik mo off record katas model mamrek esel para tape hindi agi mo lis ringi agi di career off mamol mo
So agi mo off the record this mo tagi the issue.
awla mo na at nakal delegate trabalilyo.
Sulang chairman malungusil krim flow leaders itu na mabel katakla. An awas hoping wasing kombremula ay gitu mo mabel katak ng selame yang katmok naman sa umamal mo understand. Eda kadil nga raptel mo mo lab ya blue nga ring. Ako masyadal regulation ng mal simple mal kadip. Ya do Mr. RPPL 9-21 kitmakla money laundering. Ang nama ko dal akal 10 years or 11 years or 12 years silmer lang. Mabay di gari ka kasi klel san man na maklo amlam tamal. Rablu bela kami tatamal ka kare. Kami tali mlabot makli tagid mlami. Ang understand na siya kadamlisi al ula money laundering mandakal happen na bulwadling. So although nga sila ablu bela ma aurora lungil marahil. Yung domestic regulation ng malungil, abay gadi kalakol kami kasi. Kami utem la ulit yang, egal truerakal mra, adomo ulme, kalel sak plam lam tamal tamal kare lurer blam kat maklil, mlisi egal gital lo mesengi.
Saule delegate mral lamutu irakal do usper tegital money laundering act. Hindi ulo magat mla additional. Ngaringa chances ra teletel do. Tiadir ka ngara transfer do law. Kumagay ang arawon time, kumunta ko sa kalaog, roll adul los mo dura post office rom aramani order, game na mo diakal to koy. Lakad gup na mo ang model system ra tele do. Tia additional mo rel agid mlisira. Hindi ka talamal. Erdi miruringi mo diakal dub atalmal.
Wala mo ra at nakal senator nakamura.
Sulang chairman. Wala ko kel tora marigil. Okay, sulang. I'm going to just ease it up. I'm going to ask these questions in English, but simple questions. So, I understand the regulations, and basically you're just adding these two to the definitions of 17 PNCA Section 3301(1) as those who are covered, and then the reporting requirement, which is for the 17 PNCA 3301J. So I understand them. But let's go to the virtual asset service providers. And the first question is this allowed under our law, this type of business?
Yes, it is.
And are there specific statutory that allows them, or is this just what you call it was not defined, so it's, you're doing business that is not prohibited? It's the latter one.
The latter one,
Okay.
yes.
All right. And so just to be clear, virtual asset service providers, VASPs, those are not prohibited under our statute. So the purpose of this is that you want to cover them and to put them in the regulation. I'm just asking these simple questions so at least the people are going to understand what you're trying to do. People who's going to be watching this. Now, let's go to the next one. Money and value transfer services. You mentioned the PayPal. I know Apple Pay. I've seen stores using with the WePay that accept WePay and Alipay, stores in Palau that accept those. And then we also talked to me, money and value transfer services probably might have to include Western Union, and then these remittances. In the past, in the inception of this law, did you require Western Union and these remittances to register or to be subject to the Money Laundering Act?
So they are required under the law to be subject to the Money Laundering Act. We're including this provision specifically so that it's really clear for our international standards
Okay, all right.
that it meets it.
Okay. So it's clear. So it's going to be clear. So let me ask you: all the remittances in Palau, are those registered? Currently registered?
We know like money like a Western Union is registered.
Yeah.
We understand. So going back to this issue about remittances happening in a different way, those people could be considered remitters as well, and they wouldn't be registered.
I'm actually talking about actual businesses who have a business license to remit. Those, are they registered?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Friday night, I'll use the example. I went to Franco's store to purchase some groceries, and then there's a tourist who brought his phone, an Apple phone, and then just, paid with his Apple Pay or his credit card. And then, tapped on the machine, the store got its money, and then he left them. And if we're going to require, who are you going to, so he was using, let me assume he was using Apple Pay. And these regulations are already in place. Who are you going to require to register? Apple Corporation? Or Alibaba, Alipay, or PayPal? Because I'm saying this because a lot of Palauans use these, especially young ones who travel from the States here. My daughter has one, and she just uses Apple Pay everywhere because it's linked to her bank account. It's linked to her credit card. That's that's my understanding. That's how it works. So let's assume that we require them in these regulations. How do we enforce it? And then I have some follow-up, Chairman Nepal.
So this is kind of a complicated. It's not complicated. It's a pretty simple, straightforward answer, but it's something we have to work with tax through the business licensing department on. So part of the reason for enforcing this is the registry, right? So we're going to be putting out there that the people that fall within this category, and we will be issuing guidance to explain who is required to comply under this, that they have to register with us. Once we know that they are registered with us, then we'll be able to better enforce it.
So let's say the big, I'm sure Tim Cook doesn't want to come here and waste his time on these. So let's assume that, Apple Corporation doesn't register or whatever one way to do this via enforcement is to mandate our stores to say you shall not accept Apple Pay. Is that what you're trying to say?
I don't think we would be trying to mandate that. I think one of our problems is that the branch of like the doing business in Palau is really on tax, right? And so we have to work with tax to figure out what the parameters are. We've spoken with the director over there about so this is where the complication comes in because they're off island entities doing business here in Palau. And so we understand from tax that they have a threshold that they operate at where those entities are the ones that are required to do business in Palau. We do have to think through a little more closely about Apple Pay and those sorts of things. But we wanted to get the law down first and then work through that one.
Okay. And the reason why I was sort of raising these issues is because we don't want to come up with something and then not have a regulation and then I can't even enforce it But I say this because I want to tie this into majority of foreign workers who are in Palau, and they no longer utilize remittances, and they actually utilize an app to send their money back home. And we can't capture that. But what I do know, because I've seen it, is that they would deposit their money in their bank account here, and their bank account here is linked to their app, and then they would send that money. It would just be a regular transfer from their bank account here to another bank account off island. I think that's where a lot of problems that are concerns. And so I think instead of just, we put this in the regulation to require them to register, but at the end of the day, we got to get what, these people needs to pay to our government. And we rely on that money for a pension plan. We rely on that money for services that we're providing. So I'm pretty sure back in the day, 20 years ago, I know that they were carrying cash out. But, it's hard to carry cash now, or they won't be able to justify that much. And so they're utilizing technology, and it seems that we're not doing anything. But let me just state, the chairman, that I think, you and the 4 or 5 people working in your office, chairman, that's not enough. We're talking about millions of dollars that are being siphoned out. And so when you say 4 people, I mean, I don't think there has to be at least 3 or 4 full-time people monitoring this money going out, because your job is to follow the money. And so let me just make those comments, Chairman Sulang.
So mil comment trigger zero era mo itamay kan mura bitang.
Oh, I think address still money value transfer service and why we're wanting to have it in place at a time. So one of the biggest thing around the region, and because of the diversification of economy, but to balura South Pacific, and a platform of just using apps. Again, apps are tied to the telecom company. So this is in part getting ready for that if it does come down, Merbelo. Yeah. So, and then as the second portion, as far as remittance, tinmutil as libo off the record, egim sodi segidal side.
Molo mo. Di am sulang til ay amal mokte kita ikal meeting. Kuy dolmol man ngarager makma ulaw nung nga at nga kaldeligit ringiwan.
Usually, Chair, Roma, tigal adame, mla mdura ula, ora mlo inline morsel grilla Florida. Marigil, ora da kalungil mara, lo open em encher ma, togira karige, assume diril da kalungil om encher ngil open encher por seguir la setter ngil gorarul. Mlo msada gil migrel chobal, chibel diril rumula maklol. Manilandering may gilbebira to. Kumlam sa gil adra bebira blulo loroklo. Kumigom aware wase balklol adra mo the blue bella ospera chikyas.
We're aware of it, but it's not here yet. We haven't seen it yet come through. But maybe it's operating and we haven't seen it come in
It's
through the
been
reports.
operating for quite some time now.
Ang awulagik mong ndira kalamay, ndira kal sisbra financial system rigid. Aigel kulokoy sa Arcel report, aigel yasoyis bra financial system rigid. Awulagi aware sa igagi dal badangela phone apps, alospe ar other ngar alsila belaw, ning soyis bra alsila financial system.
Say, aulak bring it up. Kumsa da silgrila deligat ng pangalo si. Ngari nga ba yung magigere madul brula maklol money laundering instead ra. Aigal gari ka moli del mora abebira germ. Hindi ako nangel wasing mola kara investigation recommended sa mil detectoring, but Chikyas has been operating in Palau for quite some time now. Si Emily Mora iga restaurant, si Emily Mora beauty shop, si Emily go all over the place nga rin adal nga rin si Il Sendra ogi maklub, nga rin akmong atu dalal firingi, si Il Sendra tartaklub. Kami bom momes sa segid. Akum da si Sel Alparta FIU, you can correct me if I'm wrong, Giriul detectra mainly movement tra daw in and out of Palau prevent money laundering. And then Shell as a small developing island nation, Shell da also dal mo victim niya agel terrorism financial mechanism. Sige da preventory. Mang selm sense ra wasit yang money laundering or terrorism financing. Ang girul mere del bring in reliable law enforcement
entity. Do you have that
Uh,
capability?
Oy, nga executive order 406 semle create a money laundering working group and then from that they create a financial crime and investigative unit. So sel money laundering working group policy people tira directorial agencies mana sel FCIU are the technical people, the police, customs, immigrations, obviously SP, AG. Seguida wal response team to igagidal when there's a report like a sel issue a remittance. That's an issue that's being discussed by that group on who best to handle it and how to handle it. So yes, ang nga mechanism in place that deal with issues like that when they do arise.
Chair, medical level will provide the shade information the shade igigidal kung create the body mga bodo nila set nga member in the future. Leng aula uwer selula FIU sum consent sa suspicion al movement ra do. Hindi algirul magaring girul ngul mora attention ra investigative body. Force kom subudia FIC hindi kom dalgirul magaring. Now, tida ka rin little more siya. Hindi ka gisalis ng dictor rin sila siya. But to other be allow obla free sa account or I don't know whose entity or whose power amla free sa account to other be allow. Again, suspicion. Dahil suspicious yung ngoral adrial giredal more siya. Is it related to terrorism, financing? Siya degree ka chere. At meeting po rin na 2 p.m. Sula.
So, sel executive we gimo sa amin provider ka executive order mara about the Senate and the House. Sel executive order was created just because of that. Kama limited to detecting it, but as far as investigating law enforcement. So I'll hand it over to someone else. So that's why I give ask the then president create a tial body where assign the body el gidi mesang en un mistrir etira investigating.
Oy, ak understand ra encher raw. Adi sayigid wasi. Sales ko mong suspicious, ikaw tal mo kasi omun sa sayigid al body. Agero si how long is el body mo o hold the account to other hostage? If I'm la areg the account, how long will that? Leng di regal da al gire lo reg the account to other for so long maybe se che gire mo misring ilo si. Le regul to di nga limit ri nga regel statute of crime. Asugo munguk mla mo da al gire lo reg the account to diwa akora omor yung lakla statute na siya milchar sa seguida gire kakargeri tang mo mesin sumumla reg the account to other for so many years or maybe certain time alaka ngartir and then release sa account siya digri gisalis to mindictor rengs urang singa blum sulara tele.
So man masula delikata may say kamama we're not aware of any freezing obi samla issue. Agi aware ala klisi amra la amaldi 5 days. That's what we're allowed. So kung magi-freeze sa account raat, agi allow the freezing for 5 days. Any longer than that, ingiramal mo ra karkarili ask kritik kung sa amal malamol malorda kadaya. So kung mga ringa account freezed out there right now, hindi na kalakama ma-issue igal freezing order igal account.
Sel executive order amlari nga executive order tia 260 something ko commented ra 306 et tia we sent the executive order lulukoring 406 mga ringa changes ra alsel era kada mo centering mura House of Delegates marmurar bekan members akwa microphone ngum sa nga delegate travelio
Mamsala, delegate ring iwan mla bring up tial toko ra FIU may FIC limited ang aliw. Because ang executive order, kung lang mo follow executive order, kami ko emomru lagi. Makpayor das we chairman kasi silto ko executive order ada ka lungil. Ilabay will makatmok la alla todo olbira kalulaw kasi kada makarang ling tapto kaigal issue ablur belaw ya tokar other belaw el giril momti kaigal rogo why gimil gir investigate mo make sure ang talmal la to ko kom hold ngaraktel diga ko koradi way sige de chairman na agire del make sure ang mal katbok lang ramang ra bot hold agira ada kora bagik sige de makita dil belwade de dong simmer gida ada belo sulak
Mlemitra ader ngil nga ra FIC. I think you're both understaffed. Tira mal understaffed, mga mo understaffed. Mal limited source and most pay. Nga niya karikal, gira regulation kami. Itilo ba the cell, nga ni cell, guidance ra, MPLPCA, Madi NFBPs, ra 2023. Mga omta sa regulation and more sale, likarala, our lawyers. Let's say, to my understanding, hindi ako sabi tap palmora information ra a lawyer rak muntaang. Engel muntaang deal with laundry money, whatever, but it's his business, a lawyer. Confidential between niya, hindi kasi will tap into it according to that guidance. Hindi ako si Sir guidance ng laan diyak, hindi it's regulated na November 6 at 2023. Attorneys are not required to have available for the FIU certain records and underlying information. Kumatang lisegit? Oy. How do you tie your regulation to that one? Or can you do it?
Thank you for your question. So the regulation of attorneys is a little bit complicated because they have special carve-outs, right, for client confidential purposes, which is what you're referencing. This registry really focuses on the requirements that they can meet. So this is policies and procedures, having trainings, having a point of contact for anti-money laundering purposes, being able to prove to us that they have these things in place. So they actually work together because those are the requirements that the attorneys have to meet. And most of the attorneys have. And so as part of our registry system, it would include the attorneys for those purposes specifically. We're not asking detailed information about clients or anything like that. We're working to just make sure that they're complying with anti-money laundering purposes and not being used inadvertently as a reason or a way to launder money.
So, yeah, loader lamang selling legal regulation ramamal as far as other la amal the certain activity hindi akal practice ra other la arogoy the six aspect ra practice ra other la asa amal regulate hindi akal ngil rogoy so aso ko mga other la advice ra client ringil ilalawa criminal case ringi ay dakal we're not subject to those information. Dakal sa amal kumuni sa biskama may assuming if he's defending somebody for say money laundering, dakal sa amal which in ask for those information. Lang dakal listed under cell activity, kama mas amal regulate ni. Ayel carve out specifically amil gatmok lal protect or say the attorney-client privilege. So ulang nga rin sigil ay the provisions ang nga rin ma sigil protect or sigil attorney-client privilege.
and I think it's important to note, Boboy kind of touched on this, is that for the attorneys, it's a narrow band of activity. So it's really they're going to see the most cash or they're going to see company formation, right? So it's a band within the Money Laundering Act. It's not everything they do. It's just that activity specifically.
Selomio by Galcom Bali, it will create a Gilwal trust account Regalcom Bali. O merko mo pa udo daloya kay gigil. Igigida gil activity sa lorula adrala igigida gim regulate. Mawa sumta facilitate otro lalawa ut mga ray igigida la sa amel regulate. But things outside of those, ada ka sa amel mura adrala sa bis ka ma information ray kang.
Senator Nakamura, kamulumul mo.
Chairman, Itong, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, when you allow virtual assets service providers to register, I'm pretty sure there are a lot of people who want to tap that business in Palau. So the question is, are you guys able and ready and prepared to tackle that? Because I'm sitting here and I'm having, because cryptocurrency, crypto exchanges is a huge, technical, talk about a lot of, I'm not the expert, but I'm talking about a lot of hardwares, a lot of softwares, a lot of information exchange left and right. And I mean, are you guys ready to tackle that?
I'm going to slide a little bit back and forth between my legal counsel hat for FIC and my director hat for FIU. Under the international money laundering standards, there's 3 ways to handle virtual asset service providers. There's outright banning, which is hard to enforce. There's licensure, and then there's registry. And it's only for the anti-money laundering portion of it. So making sure that virtual asset service providers meet the obligations of the anti-money laundering laws, right? So that's what they're looking at. Now, separately, FIC, there's the issue of licensing virtual asset service providers from a prudential perspective. And that's something that should happen, or there should be some sort of legislative law put in place to address something like that. So we have 2 different things going on. So we're trying to meet the from the FIU side, we're trying to meet the requirements of these international obligations and also at least have a stopgap in place, right? So that we can make sure that we're at least trying to address these issues. On the FIC side, that's where they might want to focus a little bit more on the licensure of virtual asset service providers or banking institutions.
So let's say a person that decides, what's a big exchange? I don't know, Binance.
Finance.
But let's say Binance come here and then they register. They say, yeah, we'll follow your money laundering act and reporting requirements, and we have our rules and regs, and and I'm sure they have it. But then they would go to Bureau of Taxation. They get their business licenses. Are they, and without having FIC specifically regulating that, how is that going to work? I mean, to me, a perfect world, or I think it should be tandem, both of them. We either have to decide that we're going to ban it, so registration is. I'm not sure whether if we ban it, not sure whether registration is required because it's illegal, or we're gonna license it, or I'm talking about FIC side. Because what you're talking about reporting, and I'm talking about whether this is. I know you understood what my question is, and so how do we? It seems that there's huge gray area between these two. And I don't think that's good as a nation to have this huge gray area.
I certainly understand your point, and we share the concerns there. So I think one of the issues that we're facing is that the regulation of banks or financial institutions on FIC side is very narrowly tailored to banks, securities dealers, and securities brokers. So virtual asset service providers don't factor in there at all. They can just operate. So it makes it difficult. So it definitely needs to be addressed. On the FIU side, with these regulations, we create a space where at least the anti-money laundering stuff can be addressed. And we can do our job with that at the very, very minimum. But yes, I think on FIC side, that's something that would need to be addressed with the board, and I know is something that is being discussed actively within FIC at this time with the new executive commissioner as well. I don't know if that answers your question, but it's certainly something that we're concerned about too.
Another reason for implementing this is, as you've asked there earlier, it's the absence of the law that sort of dictates it. So we're reacting because there are registered entities now with the Bureau of Revenue and Taxation. So we have to figure out a way to fill that gap right now.
And we received actually upgrades in 2023 for some of the passage of the FIU regulations. And one of the things we received a downgrade was recommendation 15, which is new technologies. We tried to say, because that's how I read it, that our financial institution provision allowed for VASPs. And APG said, no, only halfway. So that's why we're passing these regulations also, because we want a whole way cover VASPs. So on the FIU side, we are just trying to do the best we can.
Senator Rudin.
Alim sulang chairman alim malungin swelbe. With a question, chairman, I'm going to spin plan then flip flop with a switch back and forth for you with English. Amok tel regulation ILD2, right? Regulation number 3, regulation number 4, correct? LSL issue lang FIU AML CFT and momsadra VASPs malibang MVTS. And the purpose is try to track down financial transactions which are parallel or out of the norm through the digital phone or other means other than through the banks or cash, I say. Is that the premise on this one? But right now, I asked the director of the tax before, can they track the payments and transactions are retail malubing? And they said they couldn't. They have to wait for the lines to cross on some bank somewhere to realize the revenue. And therefore, a huge delay for the tax realization or collection. Is that true? Because you don't have the banks here. They're banking outside of the jurisdiction. They're not the local banks. They're somewhere in New York or other foreign country.
So the purpose of adding VASPs to this is that their obligation will be, they're here, but their obligation will be to report to us suspicious transactions as well.
Understood. So that's the intention, because right now there's a time delay. If they do report or if you get informed that they did the exchange already by monetary exchange, correct?
So there's a delay, but it's within the scope of the law. We've checked with the banks, and the length of time that takes for them to notify us is within our law, legal requirements. Yeah.
Okay, so tell the question in your defense and your attempt, trying to be objective here. So if somebody goes buys some merchandise in a local store or buys property, but they don't exchange cash, they don't use the banks here, they'll use some sort of a mechanism like, let's say, WeChat or other. So it's transacted outside of Palau. How does FIU, FIC, or the taxman recognize and say there was a transaction, it should be taxed? Right now, what's your capacity right now?
Our capacity is 4 people, so we don't have a lot of capacity to do that. But our plan is, and we're working more closely with...
Yes, that's the plan.
Right.
What happens if this transaction happened last week? Where is FIU, where is FIC, and where is the taxman?
So you bring up a valid point. The creation of these regulations are mainly ayel shobail maktubar al selbelaw. Like I mentioned, the Seral ask a question Senator Nakamura, or anything lendia kala al stobering. So kamama this tiang milkat mokal make sure gigidil kombali license tra al silabelaw kamama regulate to the extent that we're able to.
Talagang existing regulations.
These
Yeah,
are
like-
these are new regulations.
So therefore, you're like you said, you're reacting to this. Back to the question: if there were a couple of transactions last month, does the taxman or the FIU FIC recognize, or do they get informed of those transactions? It was $1 million transaction. Are you aware of that? Are you made aware, or is the taxman made aware? What if they choose not to report? What happens?
Well, and so this is part of the enforcement mechanisms, right? So if it was made last month $1 million and it was on Apple Pay, for example, we wouldn't necessarily, and it happened outside of Palau, we wouldn't necessarily know about it. Some of the benefit of being an FIU is that we are in communication with other FIUs and we're allowed to share information. So sometimes we see other FIUs provide us with information, but these are kind of the gaps in the system, right?
So
Yeah.
and therefore, and then you say they're already registered, so they're allowed. And we had a situation with a stablecoin where they tried to circumvent the existing system, was it? And then it got found out that they did not go through the proper channels. You said there's no law, but my contention before was based on Article 9, Section 5, Subsection 6, Constitution of the Republic of Palau. So how can you allow, if you're allowing this, aren't you breaking the law, constitutional law, if you're allowing it right now, if they're not registered? Here's the language, Constitution, right? And there's no law, there's no regulation. So Section 5, Subsection 6, to provide, for the Olvira Lulaw, to provide a monetary and banking system and to create or designate the national currency.
So virtual asset service providers wouldn't necessarily be the national currency. So
It's a banking system or a financial transaction system, correct? Because if you're saying it's separate, then maybe we should all move to that and then be anonymous for a lot of our transactions.
I mean, our banking system, I think I don't have an answer for you, Senator. If I can come back to you at a later date and answer your question.
Because monetary cannot be exclusive to the US dollar. You have the yuan, peso, right? Stone money. So, but I think this language in the Constitution gives us very broad powers to control all of that, right? To regulate. So again, this is in your defense and attempting to regulate this. But I hope it shows the gap on where we're missing from point A to point B. Because I did ask the taxman, how are you going to collect the taxes on the numerous transactions on the retail side or the wholesale side or some private property matters? They said they couldn't. They had to wait for the transactions to cross paths somewhere, maybe in New York or Hong Kong. Right?
I think that's the way it happens.
That's
yes.
the way it is right now, correct?
Yeah. I don't think there's a fail safe. There's the best we can do.
Oh, no, I'm not trying to diminish the power of the FIC. I'm trying to have everybody realize what you're trying to do with these regulations is to comply so we can have all eyes and hands on this thing, right? Because if not, it's like what Senator Nakamura said about the remittance tax. Now we have to check how much remittance we received for last year. See? And then I think somebody mentioned the GCash. Right? And then we have coupons.
Yes, you have a good point. It does have to cross the financial sector for us to be able to see it. If it doesn't cross Palau's financial sector, I won't be able to see it.
There you go.
So that's where I brought up the report that's being prepared. Is that was caught because it ran through the financial sector.
I see.
So even though it's an online payment platform, it had to run through the financial sector. So when it ran through, the financial sector said, look, these people are not supposed to be doing this. So that's how we find out that person, and that's where we can reach out to the taxman and say, you're owed this much money from these people because they ran through the financial system.
Because you're trying to regulate the tokenization of property and everything. Those fall under this too, right? If you tokenize property so you can transact between the two digital residents, I mean, Palau is left out of it, correct?
Yes, that's correct. That we would be
So
out of that.
I think we need to call a spade and say that should, I mean, it's a risk for Palau security. If you're going to have digital residents staying outside of Palau and transacting on tokenized properties of Palau, we're basically selling, or we've just sold out our sovereignty. And then I have a request, the Chairman. Instead of trying to follow the outside institutions and following on their rules, I think we should kind of concentrate on our rules and how to protect ourselves first. Why say? Please, mo spare mic.
Sulage Senator Rudim aiga mring luriol ang besel tokol bot si Brazil. Kamal mlere. Ara ong elon molbila dim lagi mdasra lagi dim le react rulia FIC act ang mlehap pena ngwal reaction rigide ko FIC law. Yalang ang Senator Boles president. Mal mlamo ut. Giredo mo makarugoy rulil mo ngilel mo atera tal kukter lol ngarigim tergal besel ngal galer al time el duspe arwa de ngal lol tekle en numur taw do ma business asel bulat yo spe ragi surgamiu ragi surgui.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out the algebra or geometric term about the trajectory and the intersection of the trajectory, and then that's where you find out. But it could be like 6 months from now or a year from now. Udle chairman na obugura denis turwa galer babil mata ruba krabulum. Makaruba ka mga ringin, di ringin mo 6 months. Yang karuba ka mo sige abura denis, kan makaiba lang mo wasay. Sel 50 dalam mo 120 dala. Makaruba ka say ngram kum lama sa aralo, sel kalwa biam lam muklo. Didim nakatam lo tinggal armel babi mo. Denis boy ko serba. Daka, I think it's a point and I think that it relates to the stablecoin concerns that we had. Major concerns against the digital residency because of the powers that be made some statements that I think were deliberately trying to delineate the locals from the digital residents. Actually, the chairman Udrela say kabo mesa sele gunda sa other tebre da ayadar mayak lertit in mora gemik kara other nga outside the faceless and nameless enjoy sovereignty telbulu by tokenized properties. I think that's a disservice, a violation ra constitution of Palau. The second pointer say, sula chairman na, I give the 2 points, and they have a point. Hindi ko mal daga daga ng gawa lutang moklam mo da aswa mo da ami obul ta da kosa nga rogo mo. Ang sibikan mo help chairman mo mataklim but on the record you agree with what our observation on this one. Capish. Okay. Yeah, I want to confirm chairman Sula. Thank you. Sula Audrey.
Musulang bring that up pero kada mo mesatire dire kan ngarnya pepiraker. Ngaulang nung sa at Vice Chairman na Committee, Senator LDPN. Paul Marigel por Delegat Trabilio.
So let's say, good afternoon. And thank you for all your efforts trying to help make sure Palau is not going to be a safe haven for money laundering activities and all these criminal financial crimes that can be attracted to Palau, and especially for your forward looking to make sure that we build our capacity to manage businesses associated with this new form of financial transactions or payment systems utilizing blockchain technology and other forms of financial technology. Indeed, it's not easy, as I read from the same challenges that's facing the U.S. They're also facing the same challenge of trying to combat these crimes that's utilizing digital technology. So we appreciate your forward thinking into this sector, but at the same time, we want to make sure that the regulations that we put in place are practical, and at the same time, it has it doesn't affect the way our people do their business, especially those in the financial sector, and to try to take advantage of the technology that are available these days, especially with these payment systems such as stable coins, Alipay, or there's so much out there that that gives a wide variety of options for people, which I think is a good thing. But at the same time, the risk is always there. So we appreciate your effort doing this. So my question just two questions. One is, have we sort of planned out how we're going to be implementing this particular new provisions to the regs, especially on what specific information you will be requiring from the businesses who will be registered under this kind of business? What kind of information you will be inquiring from them, and how would you plan to require any kind of reports when they report? How often they report? The thing is, we don't want to give too much of a burden for especially small business that's still starting, to be overburdened by the the amount of regulations and information that they need to provide. That's the kind of complaint that we always get from this business community when we impose so much requirements as far as regulations. They tend to complain about the burden and the cost, just to comply with these rules.
Thank you so much. So yes, we've definitely put some thought into this because we don't want to provide undue burden, but we also want to be able to understand all the sectors quite well. So there is the registration requirements, and I know that it's not as expansive or as detailed as it could be. So of course we'll have the standard information that's being provided to tax, and also locationally where these reporting entities located. The other thing that we're looking at asking for is basically whether or not they're going to self-assess whether or not they meet the requirements of the Money Laundering Act. And we're going to put together guidance so that people understand what they're supposed to do and have a template in place so that they're able to create their own policies and procedures. So the things that they are mainly obligated to do would be to have policies and procedures in place, to have a compliance officer, somebody, the point of contact, to do trainings annually, to report suspicious transactions and CTRs. And then there's a couple of other small things, maintain books, do KYC, things like that. But in the initial registration, we're not going to ask for all of those things. They just need to tell us whether or not they have them. So that's to start, because we understand it's difficult. We've talked with the attorneys when we onboarded the attorneys, and even the attorneys were like, what do we do? And so we understand it's a difficult process to do, but that's to help us gauge where everybody is on that and to also gauge like who's part of it. Now, we're only requiring annual re-registration. So over the course of a year, or if they have a change in basic information. So over the course of the year, if their information changes, or when it comes to the next year, they re-register. The ideal situation is they grow, right? And so they have a bigger customer base, things like that. But the other thing that we're looking at is size of the entity and what their customer base is, how much money they move. And that will help us risk, right? Because if they're really small, and they don't do a lot of financial, like through the financial institutions, or go send their money overseas, then they're lower risk and we don't have to focus as much on them. And they might not have as much to give us. But if they're really big, or we recognize that they're very high risk, then they might have to provide us with more information. We might reach out and be like, show us your policies and procedures, things like that. But the basic initial information shouldn't be too arduous. It's just a fill out to start with, and then we'll adjust as we go. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, you partly answered, and thank you for that. I guess to be more specific, suppose somebody wants to apply for a license to start some kind of a payment system, like using like a stable coin, for example. How would he apply? You know, he would go to the tax office and get a business license first, or they go to you. How would what sort of guidance would you require for people who wants to do something like that?
So I believe we put in here that it's 90 days. So they will, 30 days. So they would go and get their business license first, and then 30 days after they'd register with us.
Okay, and so when they register with you, you know, you mentioned some of the information. Those are the information that we require for them. And as far as reporting, what specific information do you require for them to report?
I'm going to defer to Boboy since he deals with our reporting a bit more than I do.
So reporting as far as the reporting institutions with the registry, the ngara aso mangaringam lama mangot sir omgot lomo se ndi seng mlatchen sa scoprar okyakar kami komdimle alaurar adra senate ndi la komla opening mar adra house amo giram el mom tangi, because that's part of how we assess the risk. Agi mom tangi sa so mangaringa changes ra kami gira dal reassess our risk ra kami sa komorbab or komlorio. So that's part of the reporting process. As far as Selgo reporting side from the AML side, I get activities over 10,000. Over 10,000. I file a reporting institution in what's called the currency transaction report. I get anything that's over $10,000. El cash. What check payments are not counted towards that. Either single payment or aggregate in a very short amount of time that the institution has reason to believe that they are linked. Say that one report. And then as a longer report that they're required to is what's called a suspicious transaction report. A threshold ringing. You can just go and say la adel mora shobay ask mo lumak miskawa 11,000, what would happen? And then a shobay akmo agimo rula imo prepare a CTR file ring FIU. And then adak mo okay ere maududele todo el maral. Sel kombali by law and the regulations agira reporter say even though dimlakaw though they'll change hand. Because that is a suspicious activity. So hindi ka threshold ring. It was just an activity that was deemed suspicious by either a bank or a designated non-financial business or profession.
So, what kind of risk are you looking at? Are you looking at the risk, and how do you assess the risk? Type of business.
So a big part of it, when assessing risk, the type of product, the range of consumers that are allowed in that particular product. So I brought up like a credit union. Let me use an example. Credit union, Catholic Church. Say it's a credit union created by the Catholic Church for members of the church. And they did a lot, they sold stocks just to those members at a church. And then ang nga cap on how much they can borrow from the association and where they actually, and then one of their policies, adya ka castle change hand. A role payment that I get, whatever you borrow from the credit union is a direct allotment del morabang. So that's part of how it becomes very low risk. There is actually no change in although the manamal del mora financial institution, so it gets captured. So it makes it very low. There's very little risk of them laundering money because their amount could be allow the loan and more up to 500 tala. And then you would have to, some of them go as far as say, giremel at least ka naharara 80% or tiyal loan or before agim lutel miskaw. Mang modya kay lila adal abuse or tiyal structure.
I'm referring specifically for a payment system. Something that we have been kind of thought about before. Something like a stable coin, like the trial. One of the things we try to do is to try offer different forms of financial services that will be available for not just Palauans but also our our tourists. When they come to Palau, they will have these options of payment, making it more easier for businesses to conduct their business. And one of the area of the payment system that we were considering is that, considering our culture, where when during funeral people want to gather money and make payment to the custom or our cultural event, instead of and so we want to allow for some kind of system that where our people in outside of Palau can transfer their money easily with a very limited fees, bank fees that's going to be associated with it. And we were thinking about the concept of stable coin as a means to allow for that opportunity. So in the event that somebody wants to start a business like that, so they register as a local company to facilitate this kind of money transfer. How much of a requirement or information regarding that particular business activity do you require from the business?
It would be the same as what we require from a bank. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The list of customers and the amount of money that are being transferred.
So one of the requirements that all reporting entities have to do is they have to know their customer. And the point of knowing your customer is to be able to determine whether or not they do something out of pattern, right? Okay. So let's say you have, for example, somebody that doesn't work and they want to transfer money off island, like they get a stipend or something of $100, and they want to transfer it to, a friend in the United States, for example, and that they want to do this through blockchain or stablecoin. But okay, they don't work. They get a stipend of $100. They transfer it once a month. That this happens, right? So you're like, okay, this guy's okay. But then if it spikes, so let's say he comes across like $20,000 and all of a sudden he's transferring $20,000 in total over the course of a month. That's outside the scope of what he can do. So because you know your customer, that's suspicious. So those are the types of things that you're trying to keep an eye on and why the policies and procedures are in place, because you're able to tell, is this person high risk? Do I know, does that look out of pattern for them? So there's nothing wrong with that type of business. It's just what safeguards does the company have in place to meet these anti-money laundering standards and to help mitigate the risk?
Okay. Does the U.S. Financial system, the central bank, handle that kind of control or any kind of transaction that utilize a U.S. dollar? Does the U.S. system has access to those kind of information?
It doesn't necessarily. It depends on if it's a U.S. institution. So for the purposes of our banks, the three the big financial institutions, the U.S. does receive that information, and they're also regulated by regulators in the United States. Every country basically is working towards compliance with these international norms and having the same regulatory or a similar regulatory process in place. The U.S. now is moving towards the regulation of virtual asset service providers because now they're letting them move through the market with this new administration. And so, yeah, the U.S. does have access to that information as well. And if it's bank to bank, the U.S., if it goes to a U.S. bank, then the regulators in the United States would see that as well.
And that include the payment system that's utilizing US dollar.
It depends on if the payment system is open or closed and where the onboarding is, right? So if the payment system is just one for here in Palau, it doesn't go off island, and the financial institution that's using it is not one of the 3 FDIC insured banks. We don't have another option right now, but then the U.S. regulator wouldn't see that. If it's open and goes off island, potentially to the United States, then the regulator there would see it.
Okay.
So a good example is Binance. Binance has a Binance US and Binance International.
Enough.
They're 2 very separate entities. One is allowed to operate and regulated in the United States. The other one doesn't comply with it. So that's where the issue comes up is if you're in the United States, they will regulate you.
Sige, Chairman, ako mitral ko paint scenario al dokara mo malat das ringig mil adra board. Since etial kida dia ka central bank argin. Abelwada recognize US dollar, that's a designated currency those paying US dollar. I think that's the only currency the designated as a legal tender for Palau transactions. So sel ngara al mangkara kay gidel gora tora protector tial dala ma ay gidel tora financial transactions. Ako doesn't greatly rest with the US financial institutions, especially the U.S. Central Financial Control or banking system. Hindi ka makita po the system mo eda igay wal additional requirement regulation igidel lolo nga sir Amerikel. Hindi al baby time kada dire kalwa po Amerika la mospe de gidro bal imal al mga tmok lay gay gidal tora arwa money laundering at our own expense. Sige kita dire kal gidal mo klakar ngiling al sugo ba kada malay gay gidal additional responsibility and balgulak masing maagire dal dire kal mo additional resources to build manpower kami, your capacity to be able to handle this, and these are not easy task to get you out. To be honest with you, it's a very sophisticated industry where we will require a very not smart but very people who have a very extensive experience and knowledge about the banking and the financial system, especially the U.S. with a very broad financial system. Dome sa gigit ko did adapt tayo guk sa peda remove within our capacity. Kaya guk tiyak sa peda the create sa gigit ko partnership la bangala Amerikel ay gidel FATF maygal baby agencies blue adal the kay ngsul this edukuk tasal mal the reliable wad mal mo overregulated ma point na mo dia ka amal gorawngil ni uchi kay gidel regulation na kumnasing gidel wa magi ko gid step by step toward that siya akadim leswakal duli mang kadamam das ringi may amal misara ang ilureri.
Palmasaule, ang dasu ga diregol gidiro ko ang arbela mo katong tinga igel ko ra mo ul mo katong masada gid toingin mo ni gidel ko ra tito ko ra kukto ko ra share. Ang mo niya adr bela ul mader ng gira nga kabardam. Duro klaw do del mera bangka. Ya po wala ang amtar abusul amrura reporting manakle. Kita kung dasin ako ra matar abusul giredal mo lagi esmaud. Mam understand ras ingirel mo katmok mo beotri adr belaw. At the same time, hindi kalsal ang asabel, hindi those pa yung platform marabulul adalo rior. Ito ko raw daw dati akal di transactions raw bidral sel belaw. Bulul adalo guy adrali guk mamringer mabetra adar belaw transactions raw daw dertiang hindi guk pon mamringer adra mobile. Transfer raw daw dal mamalak ko clear nga para malubat to pay draft tira bang mga klel. Ay direct to balance out to make sure adar belaw all benefit. Ang maral gora ngari ba pirata mo dito ko hindi mo ko lang makal loror ang sebed mo tigar asi marasel gora middle lane or sebed mo makar ngi loror mo pero tara away gid transaction sa ngalagid ng ngarang bar dul local mera rear maril abul ay gid ko kurato ka showile more outside ra transfer udo del mol marak palma lobang mangungil gid del mo mo katekal makalo siga telet
Musulang chairman ay kan tilong senator aldape la tapangal direk nga mleso akal ko ramotat sa igidal direk hindi kulngit tertial te alam kora okay kalker bok mereka kumusang adelikat ring SR chairman na banking madelikat trabililo kukpol el atyagi da akarik tiale money laundering act amle amen dra penal code ra akortul sel el 17 PNCA komenge nakamurak ti etay ke magi ulumes ngi yang multify nangar alela money laundering el establisher officer FIU Michael ngar al sel tiang malplakatak kalwase ngar nga definition nangar alela yang edire kal ngar niya taigit to money laundering edire kal ngar niya sel kuk ngar lela court more strict tasyobay edire kal ngar niya a penalty etc al sel tiang al increase Michael kuk decrease a penalty sini edire kal ngar niya forfeiture me ang alla amal structure edire kal mal mlaset ta threshold ra fines ra al selayam Hindi segit ya awul makuker ngi chairman mara FIU alla adire kan mils kamiwa mal msisi plisi ra tokoy ra regulation ra establish a regulation al sila bulur belaw mung segit ya agi mo mes ngi wase a office ra FIU Amil katmok by executive order. Emlana under officer HC. Emu more officer ekor komuna atra FIC. Hindi alla ati akal sang akli CL limited akli CL an atra FIC. Lomes raurere la FIU. Hindi akli CL mo bito maluba ko mo amin da maluba ko matmok like lorul. Saygider elang agi mo mesringil waseng malungil langar nga laan lam katmok ra o tutel ay gagi tuluri ra money laundering. Hindi ko excessive over regulatory ra adra FIU. Agi mo mesringil albang ringil waseng makarang ado riol girel saygid ya. Lendi kakli sige iul. Almo mengitu keringi maluba kom tomeri. Malimited akli si ela atra FIU which tirkay yagiril lo mes tialureo. Defined by law. Ya tungul mo sa igit yang sang akli si el SPL marulaw regulation yung tingin loltaw. Sa igit ya pa ipota kayo ng sergi o mes sergi luwas matya ka mo makarani. Lang makarangkal ate tingin muru lala tingin lol tauta au regulation ngi al dia ka supervisory al ngarngi. Oh, tigay gitu ya. Kamsulang.
Masulara kadime chairman hindi unfortunately tilang one issue that's being litigated right now tura case court el mumadakal sa amal hensir til al kadim lang existing al lawsuit ng arakar kadil al time.
Dia kamsulang ito po off record. Okay, mata kamsulang. Sabi titlog talpak to record. At taragir kung awase kung lil siya babiyar el mail wase ay kal regulation ala kamo taut. Yar adra tiaikidle Asia Pacific Group for Money Laundering amo flakar kidel on the gray list. Sabi emal mutal explainer say.
So, sell gray listing at the Asia Pacific Group, awal bol mo, while its label or give as, it's, well, di ka meet international banking standard, so, egel maklol al adal do me daw dringi mangarang asel mo agi mo stoblo mis kamaw daw la kom la sois vertay et yang am la happen sa lidra a South Pacific amal mle especially man naklol effect ri Vanuatu where tirigel maklol sa lidra do me daw tir am lak mo tir sa gi stobro kami modya kami ana modya sa mi until ko may gal luula anti-money laundering kami, el-memit ta international requirement. Sa lidra PNC, direct lang el-sel el-all-time. So, tatrar el-alawrir laman gala, tigid lo Civil Association, lol-tob dar til, direct el-tumalis el-ability til lo medaw against the government til. So, say, apalagul sa el blacklisting, or gray listing, mosubes.
Ngungil lagu ke resele en direct como lo menciono lo hace Palau a direct el member Egmont Group for Financial Intelligence Unit. Matir gay ya reporting kami ya report el mortir.
Akum da swingla iliwil differently chairman said agi bay na notok mo ndir ka po the member ngi. SL Egmont Group, ay rokul al-adra FIU rablulat at makaloader al-kayang sewel combat transnational money laundering.
Okay. So, misal tulo asan nirkakapo to member ngi. Kom la apply to be a member, oy ngarang.
Agim la apply, la matigar terul, kadospe awal terul sponsors to be able to become a member. Agim lamatiga tul countries sa lil bela wal mlakongel mo sponsor rigid. So it is in the process.
Oy ngarang kom le apply.
Agim le apply at July 2025.
So tiadir ko recent. So how long have been ka member tial Asia Pacific Group?
At since 2002.
Okay. May LA since 2002, mer LA ngayon la amis kami ay kay hindi LA nga kumrulaw regulation nol taut. A question na say mang why ang man makatkatal time ay kal ngarti alla ay LA nga regulation am promulgated rol taut. Elo one by one edim lakatal timdirya imol regulation mo taut ro.
So I gotta give the international requirement al direct legida member over time I'm not changed. So agi we try the start the process nga kuk change. Makaduk lamutul we go back to square one so ilang unang wagim sal or all the kay regulations ilang try to meet them where kuk la change sa standard.
Ngayon nga last reporting kamil mo ran atra FIC.
Last month, last report mo ra governing board.
O yakmil silo sa March 3. Is that your reporting na March 3? Sa papier film submit rin in May?
O, yung lagi naman mo, mesa minutes ra kama may confirm rin chairman.
El atya kita gimomes ringi kamamal ko ngartial olbe no. Chair ay kal committee atray lo say krole le oreo lo pangkamiw. Ele nga ikal pato kal molko na ikal to ra money laundering. Mabebi ra oreo ren latmaw tel sweldo lo kornya senator Rudim, sweldo lo kornya senator Aldabel. And basically kadam sa kay gidol ko ra virtual transactions raw daw. Masaygid ya agi osay krolel mula sa kadamakarangit makalawreur set ta guidelines maluulay kang mansabel tial unit ra FIU lomese all tout leng wayal koray gigit ya missing link leki direk lom ta sulwase ay kang direk kirel ngarnya la el direk el mo covered ra otutel ma orotel mansabel produce a license tir me el asegi dia un ma kioken leng compart traikal el association sel ngara outside etiakal ya papil ngiu sel lasin mer kamam luase alaki mo tautay kang katamra gray list away al ko mal intimidate ra society ra business ra bulur pelaw mo kamam ngarol bil mung segi dia gi mo segi ngil wase kada makarang sa peedel kutmok laikang man sa peel mo la maot tutel smoothly makamiw pumungil mangkar langar ngi a continuity ra information al sa legal finance makort lekor kami mo sa report in a proper manner agi mamal ko lang patokat le adra a World Bank recently elam limit kami letamru ra a omsu ra financial sector kita ra puru belaw trial update ngim nga ka tire kalmle tiato ko ra last year kailep selal minister eng diriir magi limit makmle trial lo say gra ra FIC mula sa kami mata damit rogoy mul sa pedal at makarogoy mo understand ra tal rail git opang bol nga niya understanding rikit leng payment mai transaction dire kamle part 3 e-banking mung ding tim la ka show up mayak mle ko le takmula se ngariya off island tamlo de kalsa main di I think other ramle ensera tingwa me el asay gid el ang agim try lawsuit mula sa makarangit makarogoy gamil entity makamama Ministry of Finance leng dia gim mo ngel klawad luwa sa mangaranga action been taken al sa legal department kamama waya gim left out mo gim mo ngel mula sa what's going on agim marang mula sa alla agil makatmok logi way kang instead agitim laigat masay gim mo regulate tay kang masay gid ya waya liid communication gid munsaba edel mage oriol girel
Kaki mal aware the program World Bank lang agi like you said kana reach out hindi ko yakal sa mamal al ngartyang al masadra FIC but we do agree musanggira that makaloryo and we always welcome the opportunity meramatala committee or the Senate as a whole and give you and lay out sing ngarang amladu what are our plans moving forward. So if that's something that the committee wants, and we're more than happy to matala committee and explain that.
Hindi ka masulang, hindi ka akiti malukoyling kada kuk TL roko ilt makalorior. And we need to work closely lo mesay kang ikut mo kung morse lungil understanding kita roko. Hindi sel omguk tiya ka understanding rigitil el an tiya ka luula a crypto tiya ka luula stable coin. Adi imon la lam katmok lal girela virtual asset malumen transaction. Adi tal patsingkolo lam katmok. Mencaya ko meser ngil partner tiyan di ngil hindi ay kel kuk maral may. How do we set regulations ratlet telel na amo license ay kang? Hindi ko mlamululan la al sumil ka pero which is fine. Hindi sel do mes ay kal al telet tial baldo try kal la al nam ka mas kamyak lisi amo regulate na at ko real estate, regulate the transaction na bank, regulate mengbek patengil. Mulmutar adran la. Section 1, 2, 3. Ligay kit ya do mes enting ay gay kit el kora missing el partra arwa e-banking, cryptocurrency, stable coins. Ay kem direk gira da kato tu wasem ko makara. Ay gigor expect to wase sel obo mo meeting el kami partra kang em to wasen dia kaluul belaw el access ay kang. Hindi instead sel o may ekom mulwasen kina malmuru laluul au regulate tay kang. There's a confusement in malklo direk alul mamal al direk al mo confuse mula say FIU regulate tay kang al kirel lang arang. Malubi ka dati regulate lang mandate trad adra al kami wa associate loban triril wa Asia Pacific Group para anti-money laundering like yung mesalwa sa pelawa apart tra US system nga rin FTIC hindi ka part tra Europe hindi ka part tra there's direct take him understand there's a between radical link ra a distriction radical blue mula sa pelong follow under it.
Okay. So, Asia Pacific Group, Aplu Amrigel is a member of the Asia Pacific Group. Yeah. So, agimal, we share the same concern. Nung di akala, ikamamamlamedumal, trial regulate. It's as I mentioned in my Senator Nakamura, we're being reactive right now.
Yes.
Then di nakala lutob dakmo tial activity at yakal allowed traveler belaw. So attacks went ahead issue a license.
Yes.
So and when were made aware of them, so these are done to remedy that. So but we bagimal kongir museng gira del makalorder create tala mo o say the properly licensed regulate legal entity dakadil waygay del kuktimor seliga gimel memel mes kami musagim ako regulated tigil specific sector. So agimal kong ik musengania absence rala al gira del motmak lawder yakut mokla.
Yaman masulang. Di last el kulko kukwa na may kan sa delegate ng SR chairman na committee ra house. Sel the por sel designated the sel tutulwasing designated ng financial businesses and professions sa DNFBPs ang makatak la loyal section sa ringin authority 301G. Alwase trust company, casino, including internet online gambling, real estate agent and person involving in regular course of real property transfer, dealers in precious metals and precious stones, any other business and persons prescribed by FIU regulations. El asegid any other businesses, persons prescribed by FIU regulations, segid ya motmaw tersel kora concern na kamami, chairman alwase, hindi fall under segid sections. Di akadomet alwaseng ngora makita interpretation ni. Ngungila mokter ni. Adi questioner kamama awasim el ang ako klise. Ng sabi el nga lakra boundary tial prescribed by law al sum mangarala al mulay say. Mal sum any suspect al be under say ngariya klisiir al mo soiso. Al mo kadam masada maklol kombali man gekril kombali. Ngariya klisiir el direct al mo or mortal mo ngel mal gekril kombali.
So, Segidal Cell Regulation 3, say, wal poltab Tegidal Molgoning is prescribed by regulation. mang agyoba segi del wala klisi ek mo segagi del patangin la shoba ya mo soyi saba so al tsoko mendagi classifying iseng ngartegi del patangin la activity and tegim regulating so we see matangin mo sa question se ngarger klisi and segi del سيد الأمدير اللي yak musang prescribe raklisi amloyak tegi the regulation identify egal entity. So ngigel gim list egegi lamo under the tel regulation.
Akmlo mention ay galing it's already listed.
Yes, hindi like I mentioned the tel ligara tel membership regidra APG.
Oh, okay.
Egal liga they change them as technology develops.
Oh, okay.
So nguk mo as a class. And like Director mentioned, the Rec 15, now we were partially compliant. And then in SOIS, we have SL amendment. So, kada tamle downgrade, they're non-compliant.
Okay.
Lang amendment.
Okay.
So, that's why that provision is there. SL will create SL standards. Kung mo sa edal meet react sa patang la regulation.
Alright, hindi ako na mo understand akong tas ang kiriya del timo order mo omes mga tmokling direct abelaw armored by statue. Hindi implement anything without the statue till aya mo uula ka kuk mo record luway kay gidel kami face lang. Sa gid at try lo mes rin luwas makara order ro kuy create tay kang lotu maluba ka amen malsabi allow regulation will take effect. Tekaw am tangay ikaw Miss Fincher mangkal AG. Hindi akal sa allow regulation, lang alakral la.
Why say, Chairman, ending right now our regulation mo se miss maklisi magi name entity. So until ako amendra la chance ringin mo the gigidal already named ang agi mo tirak ringi ok mo kompas ringi. At the end of the day mamal agi mal tirak la. We're not trying to create anything new. So, and then Allah akmam saying anything prescribed by regulation ra FIU. So that's why agi mo try capture agi the regulation 3 amo sois versay so also ko mga niya amendment rala yagi mo directly. Hindi right now it allows us a statute mo anything that we prescribe under a regulation.
Akum taswing mlamo plakatakar kami, mlamo plakatakar kamam. Alwasan kira del makalore ekut maklit yalla almo otirkli mandator kami.
Why said Chairman?
Okay. Mlamo plakatakar kami there's something al fall under the bridge. Kami at yol taut hindi ka mamakukta ki mo tangay ul makadmo ai dai rokul. El atil ay gid ya kira del mo kawat ngit makalore yol kira. Kuk mamay kung sa Chairman House. All
right. I think a couple weeks ago we met. Other and you, we met, and I went through a lot with you guys and asked a lot from you. I think what you're trying to do is trying to make us pass the evaluation that will happen in 2018 from APG. Yeah. Where we made 20 out of 40 and 2 out of 11 recommendation with that. We failed that. We came to that conclusion that we failed, right? Yes. It's in the book.
Why
We
say?
did. Yes. So I understand where you're coming from, and I did ask the question during that time when they made the rules and regulation for APG back before we joined the group. Palau wasn't in there. So we go by their regulation. So I asked if you guys can look at their regulation and us being Palauan with 16,000 population, and make some, I don't know, recommendation to them that we are very small country, but then when you give us all these rules and regulation from APG, we come short. We will come short. And if we keep doing that, you'll take away Palau out of 16,000 population. Because we're going to live by somebody's regulation. So I asked if you guys can look into it, and others said yes. I'll take that into consideration and we'll work something out. That's good working group right there. So I'll go back to what he said. Please don't take that out of Palauans. You've seen all these virtual assets. You name them. Anything to do with electronics, we're short of that knowledge. We're short of that capability. So take that into consideration and work. Have Palauan life, people, in your mind and work toward that. How we capture the positive out of that and still being Palauan and said, hey, it's a Palauan way. This is it. But at the same time, find a way that we can capture all those virtual assets, name it, from A to Z, that hopefully within next 10 years, we still hold that regulation you're going to do. So you gave us September 2026 as a deadline. Find a way that if you can postpone it and get it all done, and let's meet again and talk before it becomes. We're meeting next week with these people coming here. I don't know if it'll help, but just my concern, don't take Palauan out of us and don't let us chase after APG's regulation out there somewhere.
Sulang chairwoman awalak po let me ask Senator Rudim to expound and clarify that provision in the Constitution was such a very important provision that we need to comply before I start. Mr. Chairman.
So, Delegate Travillo, Cell Article 9, Section 5, Aklisiel Olbirak Lulaw, Subsection 5 say, Olbirak Lulaw shall provide the monetary and banking system and to create or designate a national currency. That's it. My brother.
Sulang Chairman and I have my question earlier and then I'm going to ask also the same thing. And maybe this is the reason why we don't have laws in place. And we're getting into this new technology that even the financial matters are most important in Palau. And like Senator Basilius and other members, I agree with them that we need to work together because I'm very surprised that you've been a member of all of these financial institution outside, and we don't have law our own and a regulation that are not in place. So we're just following the flow from the outside. Like our chairwoman says, we need to have our laws to ensure the protection of the people doing business in Palau and all the Palauans that are in Palau. So I'm really want to work with you, and we're very lucky because there's two chairperson of the financial matters here. So let's work together and put this in place. Maybe this is the reason why we're in the court, because the law is not clarified. And once and for all, we can move forward to put our strong work to ensure the financial institution in the Republic is safe, and to ensure that when we go outside the Republic and this other membership that we're part of, we can be proud that we have our laws and regulation in place, so we can speak like what our chairperson from the House says. Let's speak and do that Palauan way that we know that we have the law in place. Thank you.
Malma Saule, Delegate Travillo, Saule Chairman. Agureng sa adong adure all time kadamla mo so yusan mura konstitusyon e plakatakla aurora say konstitusyon na karbila ro kulto koy. From the constitution ng moral law. After Allah, agim regulation. Regulation is by product alla al-gamiwa ungra al-mururi. If you don't clarify the law, hindi ka expect na by product mo clarified. Amang katukura away ito tengar al-setjar al-time, mula sa hindi ka tol tirak lalara, hindi ka regulations telgi mururi lol tirak la IPG. There is a standard ra abululat. Again, for financial thing, we have to comply with the international standard. Hindi ka wado rural laara, environmental kuktisedel murmula ara panem mula say, hindi ka mga ergel tang. This is a totally different thing. Involve ra patokl adma, patokl bulu. Sige the standard adul tirak ringe mo mrungil mo atergin. Daka saldo say kudrulil mo ngir other belaw. Omil truat other belaw da say kudrulil mo ngir tir. Tirgal kuk other belaw lu syobay. Arwa surang al marwa westel transakta syobay mar outside. Gira dal amo de tertir. Litirgagi da ulak direk ula economic activities sergit. Yes, you have to work together. Put more time to eat. Yakmal marunong lag mitel madangel wasing area shortfall ra. FIC ma FIU. The budget call is April. Maybe July we will all send our budget to you guys. Hopefully, take into consideration wasing those pay almut betokal nalit sa mga efforts ulitan mo ngin.
Oy, sulang chairman nga kani aldadakan di swadel kut maklitial tukura ya ama although the remote travel belaw kami ongora aringi elmo mongila tetelel edi selmal kulngi ringi ya tiagid kami wa hotel expert financial institution ma financial commission egal unit expert tial issue ma program kita albang ringi magi pagiram mangi legi recommendation ng kumiwa all top del mail le kombrut ringi emro ko ngem marura emro outside the lobang legal association el marula gagid aktik mulai segid le ko mas agi nga se kukta do kasi nga kleleng hindi agi expert yang ba yung mitam lawa mlaw ice magagirel mo katmok triga le guys triga kita at chairperson regal tablo kami tira house ma senate el nga tiam mo dadak edakat makli tiaw ngi belaw chairman dak tikmula sige dam sulak
Chair, kata kurang malmla at adul el mom kate kata mo matigar ngil masaya pai kira dal marurungi kita ro kuil motmak orior kut makli sige dal al mosabel lungil al suku mala ol ngasong sa ol ngasong sa ikel ikira dal mga tmok lal kira tel al takoy ma ding mang lamongil set kita chairman na mulwa say girel mom katmok kami wa sen girel mom katmok kira dal mot makaroku yung motmok karingi ati korati kekrel kari ka wa say sel sukum tukuk kora upgrade malubeng kuk requirement tertira kuk mo ngia al set requirement en wangarakl takatele en mosabiul mo madangayman dia kal bol kora wayal al lorur kami malakam comply lo pangkelay kay kitil al requirement al plan namkat mok al suman din nakal takla kadi ke ka koramil lo ko mulwa say sel sukum matukuk kora moria additional requirement marko ya kami wa akuk tiak mo dangay mang dia kam mandiakam kukmukat mok laigel requirement ito ay albol durba siyang diakam you're not in compliance mang kuk wayal kora rule it makidal belawa wayat bot lakatol tirak karsay kit so kalmo madangel mulwa siyang ang wangara kaltakatel sel kuk alboria additional requirement tirang wak ang araklit takatele ko mom tangay mong mosabi iwal el follow el kutmok lagi gid requirement
kamal msulara ngil ka delegat tending ngaring ega actually ngaring standard din dagi mo tang li alata makagi mo will go back to the office and message ligang and then will ka gi mo send the response la korkaw manding malungil ka
Chairman FIC tell VASPS VASP Sara June 30, 2023, yung de la press release ng Tilov del Mara, Logio Island Times. So you actually inform the public through the media. When I mentioned the constitutional language, it's in defense of our right to know what's going on in the country. So what you're trying to do is, I think, is within this plan in the Constitution, in the absence of law. They shall domestic proposed regulation, quote, 17 PNC 3302, Money Laundering Act. So I think that's what you're trying to do, to stay within that scope of money laundering. It's on the based on 17 PNC 3302. See, according to the telepress release ng MIWE, kung mga definition of 3301, yung mga definition of 3302. So I think ang clarify nila udule chairman akpit kani sa tokenization of properties, they are regulated, and therefore encumber a property outside the jurisdiction of Palau. Sige akpit kani kukngal person lakman LRC. The Agadiwa Secure Transaction Act, the Kumlagut Makla Secure Transaction Act, it tell process and mooring again the Gumdas and help protect other tell volume secure the transactions are deal. Mang sige da un makno mention tell what malala ala saying broad, but it's within our powers ra gut maklit yang malakal ko nga outside the overtake gid lagi way gid the technology body training. Diwangala ramel ora the nisel modak do mim. Ay makwadilong lang ulen ning segi nga lakador ko diri lang kadam tamal ring ilure komsulang. Thank you. So that Chairman.
Constitutional question Chairman Senator Rudy mang dakal imlagim kaltmokol me answer ringi eragi mo also la Chairman and Samalori Delegate Senator Mario and Samarin chok mitring mo masadri hindi right now dagim kaltmokol masadri.
Oversell executive order and create cell working group, investigative group that back in 20 sa temelaran mga saw. Letalo tabdi sa igid siguro retir call out ring na aluban na
executive lang la amendment mo executive 406.
406 sa igid retir call out ring
Maringi money laundering working group meet quarterly, FCIU meet monthly.
Okay.
Or wherever assume morning incident teng sila chair group di ko asumang morning incident.
Okay. Kasi the chairman ako na sandiri kal tara mechanism sa bedo make sure the safeguard ay gigid cook activity mo involve to ka money laundering and tigi the regulation involve sa edel gukti naro ringil direct gukti mo require ay gigid tax office and legal agency niya malumong order ako sa edel maya igel information na igil kung balil ko involved tegi
Sera ko to start al do ang koram loring al daso sing area mo kloma magikarel telura ra dekal salary is dealing with a big or small company dia giblin ado di bagim smoothie kada mara amount raw do Sugo mong kikarel ko mali di transaction rula ko nga lakartir sa dia baka mga tos nga maringi ma rado lo lo misringi ose tangaram demlo masad rin ko di nakasal mas modelo ose masad ra dartakluk ndi dartakluk adal sadar tiang ito basad al mutul maklor seim maklor mi gamama malsomam rulital blul mo ngiral beklat mo safe marada mo soril mekirngi no mesra buladeng rata kay iseleng mamakita palasi elal guk teme del ngara igalo bise ito kay ngi brumule gar palasi me bol attractive tel baluma bol betokar adal me kerngi ma trigil ng ligat lor tira del getra yasalo setum la kay del lutel me nga ka material ng amle dibuse mlan mutel me
Akmo sa telela delicate trabalilyo mong morsel miscellaneous ringi kato mo orse o kore kato mesir kite mo mong simra.
Mansaule chairman yung ilgo martiang at yakuk dakal related and martiang yung masaulay gal lungil meeting adigiri kada lang ako kasi dali tamis sila news ngarngi elite PISA program already tatral improve ngi modernize ngi mo ngi ra balur belaw aktigal mila sa kamen tergomiwa other FIU FIC malungil madigiri ga kasi dalgarik akpay kasi me mabol sa etia direkal to kagigit tetelela gora Olsis baudo de ola baudo del morger mager related program mo full compliance lo bangkel segid tiagid dorurungir ang make sure ang abeloa selba akregel financial transaction ra murtra sele lungi lang ket si amal di ontik.
So, mention ay comment ra kama delegat
Akti miles hindi daktaseng mention ngul mo ngarang Jamisle news article aseng malugul legal comment kami hopefully tiagid elite visa program tigil recipient ni asa ilguk mo so is tiagid kami monitor tir gagid teletal tiga kaya ududil ade memrulang ramang eda kadodngel ko aseng tomotomal kukurang rang kel mangarang pele akti mo sige de kami adi kami leta Senate bill mong hindi kami
Omen sulang chairman gi mo legal comment ra kama makamadi mo sa review.
Kora di bring up tungkol dorule all di korar mulam yo iti kata follow up mang elakduk namura elite visa. Kami sa delegate mama seralo ngara rapad mo mara al gabanor yang nultubadi omalmot tumatumi araw malgong moringi tirgal cray ngarang kelter cray here tangarang delegate sengguk makarang elakduk mara elite visa. Oh, silver hair makami mo to kataklay kang yang makita dito miyol ka amor olakang.
Apok tel mo sa lane yo sa kuramla ang laklan mo kamalmal me Senator Ruben.
Tragedy lang, ako ka declare sell tokenization of properties. Issue a lot of time sell a lease, 99-year lease. We know la seng ari issue kami mabelur bela rogir ma state governments. Ani am lang malis 99 years sa Island. It's the same concern and more tokenization of property. This is over tokenization of property. Kung das yung tenfold the wars la actual lease and moments ring ila and document. This was state to say chairman ko may sangaling. It's something rakil dira kada it's still a jungle out there. Kada clarifying. Adi the week na siya kada mall tokenize assets sa gidal move tiya sovereignty tel volume. Matangala digital residency akan tulad tel volume nga other tao tring was saying. Tomo to kung spirit dictate policy tel volume. I think that's a red flag, a danger zone. Sula chairman.
Malugil chairman akum dasu ma other FIC other feature akum dasu lamotritori kita lamla ogera ke rokul kukor aswat al momatengel ki tel regulation yem lasma da ke kukor teletel botoreor tmake omes yem motmok loloki wa aungil telwil ra aikal tel blaira house ma Senate elobong kamiu. Man sa betul kuk momit ay kita requirement sa kamiu asomul implement. Mang akpay kamama ko rati kaya karmam. Ay ki koram la oker ay kirokul so mam loker. Mabaik mo ate alon mas kamiu. Mal adra FIC ma FIU. Guk pom tuikel so miu takas musum. Aram.
Almasawli sere nakoram lego start al mula say katinged al gaso sa 2026. Kami amatingalo sa tiagid kami kami ulpot sa tamahaw sa our favorite committee. Mang gired al makaluror all the time. Our mission is the same. Ketika karusa ng arngi kami ngarun mo ng kamangara at norong hindi goal sa audiosyo. Mang kada continue makaluror I'm so happy lang. Kadang so is para kadang clear Easter Sunday. Ang korap sa the Swede so lagi tell direct batangelo say a budget is coming. Kami tell man lero ko na isa. Senator the bela man batangelo say this is shortfall ra aurior. Important el grade aurior girela mo. Sa lego budget tela kam kora ol ibam dumirngi musu guma maruli mo bols bedel next year beda ada dur tiang do sa darot na mo ta dir do sa da malalam. Ikaw mal masulang delegate rang pang manamo oso hindi oso imlay mo pergi mo mati katal time hindi para kultal ko te mo sa dal mati katal ada sulang
Thank you so much for giving us the time to come and speak to you about these things. We're always happy to talk with you. So anytime, just reach out. Feel free to reach me directly at my email address. Again, thank you so much. A lot of things to think about, and we'll definitely take all comments into consideration. Sulang.
Namalo ay siya, ay direk pagkum terkaro ko chairman ra House of Delegates, marokul delegates, mar senators, marapek member ra senator tial al hearing al mlo sa pamiwul al kutmok la al sang miwe ya kada may mites maday kang chairman agi mo malmol mga tadur kamiw al kirela ikal patok al lorior al domes mga tmok le ya direk al suara al top the report ran adana World Bank ya direk al potamit rokuy domes sergi edol mol malorior al mga sumok laigel al ko kirel mo al mo o taut mal ube ko mo mga sumok al kirel at to tial al to rabang kamat to finance ra blur belong adang ya ko mal musulang ya hearing ati meritiang mo ko